Back in 2019, in my first ever YouTube video, I said this. And with full frame, you get this fantastic depth of field. The depth of field is just so much more cinematic that I know for sure that I would never go back to a cropped sensor camera. Well, I was wrong about that, wasn't I? I pre-ordered the Panasonic Lumix GH6 once it was announced. It could shoot open gate, Apple ProRes, amazing IBIS, just to mention a few features that attracted me to this camera. And of course, the main attraction was the low price. And now, 1 year later, I'll let you know both the pros and the cons with the Lumix GH6 and if you should buy one in 2023 or potentially go for the similarly priced full-frame camera, the Panasonic Lumix S5 Mark II, and in this case, more specifically, the S5 to X, as it has more video features compared to the non-X version. The GH6 has been a dream to work with, and I have probably used all available 4K codecs, depending on the specific shoot I was on. All of the codecs, almost, are non-cropped in 4K, some more suitable for YouTube, like long up, or all-I for more professional work, in case you need higher quality image, and it's also much easier to color grade. You also have various Apple ProRes codecs in case you need the maximum image quality possible, all the way up to 422 HQ 1.5 gigabits. Gigabits or gigabytes? This is of course a pro, but the con with these files is that they are very big. However, with the additional firmware update we got mid-2022, we can now record directly to an external SSD drive, which is cheaper than a CF Express card, and you can get much more storage space. The codec that I have started using more the last couple of months is Apple ProRes 422 at 510 megabits per second in 17.9 aspect ratio, so it's a little bit wider than the normal 4K 16:9. Apart from switching from Canon cameras to Panasonic, I also switched my editing software from Premiere Pro to DaVinci Resolve in 2022, and editing the ProRes codecs on my aging 27-inch Intel iMac is a dream. I have no lag in 4K timeline, and I can also put my LUT on when editing, so I don't have to edit footage, for example, in Vlog. And on a side note, there are certain Canon codecs that my iMac is not very happy to edit, and it really lags a lot. But with the Panasonic, it has been a dream. The addition of full Vlog in the GH6, together with a high-quality codecs, you can easily build your GH6 into a full-blown cinema camera. Compared to many other entry-level cinema cameras, you can also do this relatively cheap, as lenses tend to be cheaper and also lighter than full-frame mount lenses. You can of course use a lens adapter and even a speed booster to connect, for example, a PL mount expensive cinema lens to your GH6, which makes the crop factor slightly less than 2, and you gain about a stop of dynamic range. The con with the Vlog is that it is a little bit noisy in the shadows in my point of view. And if you combine Vlog with the amazing dynamic boost on the GH6, the minimum ISO is set to 2000. I have found the Cinelike D2 with some small adjustments to work very well. You might not get as high dynamic range as when shooting in Vlog, but the minimum ISO is now set to 800, and I feel the noise in the shadows is less prominent. One of the main reasons I went for the GH6 was the ability to film open gate. Combining this function with an anamorphic lens like the Sirui line with a 1.33 squeeze factor meant I could use all pixels available on the GH6 sensor and could deliver the footage in a standard 16:9 aspect ratio without any black bars at the top and bottom you would usually see if filmed on a non-open gate sensor or camera. Furthermore, the GH6 has anamorphic D-squeeze options for the display. If I want a CinemaScope look, I can film in various non-open gate modes. Speaking of open gate, it's also great for reframing your shot for use on either, for example, YouTube or Instagram in vertical mode. Now, the sensor is not perfect, but we'll come back to that a little bit later in the video. After many years of different cameras overheating, the GH6 has been fantastic. It has never overheated. I have filmed 12-hour shoots and there has never been any kind of thermal issues. And if I film in, for example, ProRes, I can just leave the camera on knowing that it will not stop because of either heating issues or, like many other cameras, do have a 30-minute recording limit in 4K, but the GH6 has not. The small battery is also quite impressive with a very long recording time, relatively speaking. If I'm filming continuously, I can use it for a couple of hours before I need to recharge it. If you film continuously, it would last you about 1 hour, but I can power the camera while using it with the included USB cable, so I'm not too worried about that. And if necessary, if you're on the go, you can use V-mount batteries and you are sorted for hours or days. Before we continue, a quick shout out to the sponsor of this video, Artlist. If you need music or sound effects for your videos, you need to check out Artlist. On Artlist, you can find the best music available both for YouTube and commercial work. You also have access to a huge library of Hollywood quality sound effects. I have been using them for years because it's so easy to find the song that you need for your video, and I can use the music both here on my YouTube channel and for my commercial work. And if you only need the music and sound effects for your own channel, you can sign up to Artlist at a much lower fee, which is very cool for the content creators. On top of the music and sound effects, you also have the possibility of signing up to Artlist Max, where you have access to stock footage, templates, and much more. If you sign up to the annual plan using my link below, you're gonna get 2 months for free, thanks to our friends at Artlist. This has probably the easiest pros and cons with this camera. As it has this small sensor, it makes the camera lightweight, it's small, and it's easier to use handheld over a longer time, and the same goes with if you use it with a gimbal. Also, using it on a motorized slider has become easier, as my Edelkrone motorized slider with all the bells and whistles was supposed to manage a 1DX Mark II, but it really didn't. So I didn't use it for quite a long time because it just kept on failing. But now with the GH6, I'm using my slider a lot because it is lightweight, the lens is weightless, so that's also a pro in case you use it for motorized sliders. So speaking of lenses for the GH6 are usually quite a bit cheaper than full-frame counterparts, and you have many to choose from, both spherical and anamorphic. And a great pro is that the GH6 has one of the best, if not the best, IBIS on the market, but we'll talk about the IBIS in a minute. There are a few cons as well, and although they are few, they might be a deal breaker for you and make you go for another camera like the S5 II. The GH6 is not a very good camera for night shoots or low light in general. The sensor is just too small. And even if you get a fast lens like an f1.7, it's still only a f3.4 equivalent on a full-frame sensor. This also affects the bokeh and the blurry background in general. Now, I was positively surprised on both the low light performance and the blurry background that you get with a fast lens on the GH6, but a camera like the Lumix S5 II will outperform the GH6 in both of these categories, the bokeh and low light shoots. Now, to make the GH6 a little bit better in low light, you could get yourself a speed booster, which, as mentioned, will add about 1 stop of dynamic range. Now, the last con with this specific micro four thirds sensor is that it can produce some weird artifacts in the shape of a line if the contrast is too big in the image. I have definitely experienced this on a few occasions. It has gotten better with the newest firmware updates, but you can still see it every now and then. Now, knowing about this limit just makes you plan the shots or the scene a little bit differently. I mean, for me, it's not a deal breaker that it has this flaw, but it might be for you. You will not see this artifact in basically 95% of the shoots, but if you plan on shooting a lot of low light and high contrast images, you are better off with the S5 II. No longer do I need to buy a stabilized lens. They are very expensive, and many of the lenses that I am interested in, like cinema lenses, are not stabilized anyway. So the IBIS on the GH6 is so good that I can use cinema lenses, even anamorphic lenses, as you have an option of using the stabilizer for anamorphic lenses. So it just opens up so many possibilities of using, for example, vintage lenses as well on the GH6. As mentioned in a previous video, when purchasing my GH6, the idea was to pair it with manual lenses and on many occasions to be used with a focus puller. So the contrast-based AF was for me not a big issue. I did use my kit lens in one talking head YouTube video, but I had to reshoot everything as the focus kept on pulsating. You do have the focus limiter, which I haven't started using yet, but I just purchased the Panasonic 25mm f.17. Still in the box? Well, let me open the box so that you can see that it's true. Oh, that's a small box. So I'm going to test out the autofocus with the focus limiter even more the upcoming days with this new cheap lens. If your work is dependent on autofocus, you need to look at the S5 II, because the autofocus there, as you know, is going to be much better. There is no comparison between the GH6 and the S5 II X, as the latter camera has Panasonic's brand new face detection, which has shown to be extremely good. Another obvious difference is the sensor size. If you plan to shoot mostly low light and need large bokeh, go for the S5 II. Do you need the highest Apple ProRes codec for possible professional work? Go for the GH6. Although the S5 II X will come with the possibility of shooting in Apple ProRes, the codec is not going to be in such a high bitrate as the GH6. But the codec might be good enough for you. And you also get access to all I codecs, which you don't get on the non-X S5 II. At the end of it all comes down to your own preferences and needs. Both the GH6 and the S5 II X are amazing cameras, and they will work very well together. If you want to see how I will use my GH6 and the upcoming S5 II X together and what lenses I'm thinking of buying, you should check out this video right here. And lastly, a huge shout out to Artlist for sponsoring this video. Go check out Artlist using my link below. Peace.